Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. As we think about the Christian life and we think about how badly we want to serve the Lord and how we want to give Him our whole heart, how we want to sacrifice our all for Him, typically we find three main things that uh, keep us from doing that, that hinder us: comfort, fear, and the desire for the past or the desire for the world. We find all three of those things in the stories of Lot and Lot's wife. If you remember back in chapter 13, uh, Abram's livestock and possessions became so great, plus Lot's possessions became so great that they couldn't stay in the same land. They were getting too big for the land. And so Abram said, "Hey Lot, if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right." And Lot chose the land that was luscious, the land that would provide a lot for his livestock, a land in which he wouldn't have to strive and struggle to find grass for his animals, the life of ease. It promised him the life of ease. It was like the garden of the Lord. And that's what he chose. It ended up causing a lot of problems. He ended up living in a land that was full of wickedness, and that really weighed on his heart. And it ended up also in the destruction of all of his possessions, as he had to rush out of there was when the Lord destroyed it. And so this caused problem in his life. And many times seeking comfort keeps us from serving the Lord. You know, typically there's nothing wrong with wanting to have comfort, right? Whenever something's wrong with us, when we experience discomfort, we seek to be comforted in some way. And I think that God has instilled that in us to ensure that we take care of ourselves. When we're hungry, it causes discomfort, and therefore we go eat. Same thing if we're thirsty, or if we're cold, or if we're hot, we adjust. That discomfort causes us to adjust so that we can get comfort. And according to normal things, that's fine. Again, that's something that God has instilled in us. But the problem is when that desire for comfort usurps our serving the Lord, to the point that we seek comfort over doing what God has commissioned us to do. We get so wrapped up in being in our comfort zone that we can't even imagine actually stepping out of that comfort zone and actually doing something that would cause us anything uncomfortable. And so when we go to serve the Lord, maybe it's in serving in a church, and we receive some type of opposition or trial. As soon as we have any discomfort, then we cease doing the work for the Lord. Or maybe in the workplaces, we are trying to share the gospel, and things get tense and things get difficult and things become uncomfortable. We cease to do that. Or maybe we don't do anything at all for fear that we will lose our comfort. Seeking comfort can sometimes hinder us from serving God, and I think we can all attest to that, that is something that's very real in our lives, and definitely something that has to be dealt with. We need to make sure that we serve the Lord despite the discomforts that it might cause sometimes. But secondly, I mentioned fear, and that's definitely true as well. I don't know if there's anything that keeps us from serving the Lord wholeheartedly more than fear. This is what happened with Lot. Lot became fearful. It's almost, if it wasn't such a serious thing, it would almost be humorous what happens with Lot. If you remember, the angels told him to go into the mountains as they fled Sodom and Gomorrah. The destruction was going to come, and he said, no, don't let me go in the mountains. The mountains are too dangerous. I might lose my life if I go into the mountains. And he said, okay, well, you can go in this small village of Zoar. And so he goes to Zoar. Well, in a turn of events, because he's afraid in Zoar, he goes to the mountains. So he goes to the original place that the angels were telling him to go to. And in both instances, he was motivated by fear. He didn't want to go to the mountains because he was afraid, and he left Zoar because he was afraid. And many times we as Christians, we are motivated by fear. We won't share the gospel with people because we're afraid of what they might think or what they might say. They might ask a question that we don't have the answer for, or whatever it is, and we become fearful, so we don't do it. And there's a numerous things, long list of things that we can do or not do because of fear. But we have to make sure that we don't allow fear to become a motivating factor in our lives. We have to be able to give our all to the Lord and to let fear or push fear to the side. You know, just like seeking comfort, fear is a natural thing, and fear is not a sin in and of itself. It's something that God has given us to protect us and to keep us from doing dangerous things and putting ourselves in harm. But again, when we allow fear to usurp our serving the Lord, that it becomes a problem. And then there's this third thing, and this is found with Lot's wife. This is seeking the things of the world, or even seeking the past. We could go either direction with this. When we see that Lot's wife looked back, one of the specific instructions the angel told them is, when we get out of here, don't look back. Don't look back at from where you're coming from. But she did. This is what it says in Genesis chapter 19. In verse 26 it says, "But his wife from behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt." And so she, as God's destroying all the cities, she looks back, and God turns her into a pillar of salt. And this becomes very descriptive of any of the Lord's people who look back. It might be that we're looking back at the past. You know, we always live in the past. All the good times were always in the past. And so we're always looking back, and we're never looking forward. And because of that, we become like a pillar of salt. In other words, we become immobile. We can no longer move forward with the Lord because we're always looking back. And we also can't go back because, as we all know, the past is in the past. You can't go back to the former days. And so you just become stuck like a big pillar of salt, unable to move forward with the Lord and to serve the Lord. And we become useless, really, to Him because, again, our gaze is always backwards. If you remember, Jesus said, "No one putting his hand to the plow looking backwards is fit for the kingdom." And that is true. If you're plowing, you have to keep your eyes straight ahead, because you have to plow those lines straight. And so you have to fix your eyes on something and aim towards whatever it is that you're fixing your eyes on ahead of you in order to make straight lines. And of course, for us as Christians, what we fix our eyes on is Jesus Christ. As Hebrews chapter 12 teaches us, fixing our eyes on Jesus Christ, the author and finisher of our faith. Fix our eyes and look ahead. Don't look in the past. But then also, we might look behind us because of our desires for the world and the things that the world can offer us. The Israelites were guilty of this as they looked back at Egypt. When they were in the wilderness, they kept looking back at Egypt. Oh, we didn't have these problems in Egypt. We had all the food we wanted back in Egypt. Oh, and they began to complain and complain. And they were looking back at the things that they had in Egypt, which signifies the world, as we'll describe in further detail in a future devotion. A lot of times our desires for the world, what we had before we became a Christian, can render us immobile and turn us into a pillar of salt, make us useless to the Lord, because we can't move forward because we're always looking back at what we used to have. And so we need to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of any of these things. The desire for comfort, the desire for fear, or because of fear, or the desire to look back. These things keep us from serving the Lord. When you look at Paul's life, Paul was a person who was wholly committed to the Lord. He gave God his all. And how was he able to do it? By avoiding these three things. When it came to comfort, he said, you know what? I've learned how to be abased and how to abound. I know how to live in poverty. I know how to live in prosperity. He said there in the book of Philippians. Paul wasn't so concerned about his comfort, so he was able to serve the Lord in that way. He didn't allow fear to be a motivating factor in his life. You remember in Acts chapter 21, when he was on his way to Jerusalem, everybody else was afraid for Paul, except for Paul. In verse 13 it says, Then Paul answered, What are you doing, weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but even to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. Paul was fearless. But he was also one who never look back in Philippians chapter 3, he talks about this. He says in verse 13, "Brethren, I do not regard myself as laying hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead." Paul always had his eyes fixed ahead on what was to come and what the Lord was bringing him into. And so we should live a life like that, a life where we don't let fear overcome our serving the Lord. We don't allow the desire for comfort to overcome our serving the Lord, nor do we allow looking back to constantly keep us from moving forward with the Lord. So let's just think about those things today as you do your reading and as you go about your daily business. Just kind of think about and contemplate, how many times am I motivated by fear or for the desire of comfort, and how much do I live in the past? We need to be aware of these things so that we can bring them before the Lord and properly deal with them with Him there. Thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you all have a great day. I love you guys. God bless.